The Starstone Lounge was the finest restaurant on Orbital 1, a large space station that orbited a newly colonized planet far from Earth. It was a place where important people gathered: alien diplomats, government officials, and powerful business leaders. The tables were always full, the air rich with the smell of exotic foods and soft music that floated through the high ceilings. For most of the workers, the Starstone Lounge was just a job. But there was one customer everyone whispered about in the kitchen and the hallways. They called him the Quiet Tyrant. No one knew his real name, only that he was a man who came in alone, dressed in plain but expensive clothes, and sat in the same corner booth every time. His face was hard, his eyes cold, and his voice sharp like a knife. The workers said he was rude and mean, but no one dared to argue with him. He would complain about the food, even when it was perfect. He would criticize the waiters and cooks for small mistakes. He rarely smiled. When he left, the whole restaurant felt heavier, as if a dark cloud had passed through. Some of the waiters tried to avoid him. Some wished he would just disappear. But every week, without fail, the Quiet Tyrant returned. On a quiet morning, just before the station shifted into its busiest hours, a young woman named Myra walked into the Starstone Lounge for her first day of work. Myra was from a small mining colony on the outer edge of the human frontier. She was not from a rich family, and she had never worked in a fancy restaurant before. But she had a steady smile, sharp eyes, and a heart full of hope. She wanted to earn enough to help her family back home and maybe one day see the stars more clearly. As she stepped into the lounge, Myra looked around with wonder. The walls sparkled with metal and glass, strange plants in glowing pots lined the windows, and the floor beneath her feet hummed softly with the station's power. The head waiter, an older man named Joro, welcomed her with a nod. "First day, huh?" Joro said. "You'll see all kinds here. Just keep your head down and your smile ready. The customers can be difficult." Myra nodded, excited but nervous. "Most of all," Joro added quietly, "watch out for the Quiet Tyrant. No one knows who he really is, but he's the toughest customer on the station. Don't take anything from him. Just do your job." Myra smiled politely but didn't say anything. The lunch hour began to swell with activity. Waiters hurried past, balancing plates of steaming food and glasses filled with sparkling drinks. The soft murmur of conversations mixed with the occasional clink of silverware. Then, as if on cue, the Quiet Tyrant appeared. He entered the restaurant without looking around, his steps measured and slow. His eyes swept the room with a cold glare before he sat down at his usual corner table. Myra's heart beat faster. Joro whispered, "Table 9. That's his spot." Myra's first assignment was to serve the Quiet Tyrant. She took a deep breath and walked toward his table. She had prepared for this moment as much as she could. She reminded herself to stay calm, polite, and professional. "Good afternoon, sir," Myra said softly. "Can I take your order?" The Quiet Tyrant looked up slowly. His eyes were sharp and piercing. "I want the solar roast," he said with a cold tone. "Rare. And make sure it's perfect." "Yes, sir," Myra replied, writing it down. "And don't forget the starfruit salad. Fresh," he added, his voice like ice. "Of course," Myra said. As she turned to leave, the Quiet Tyrant called out, "Wait. What kind of seasoning do you use on the roast?" Myra paused and smiled gently. "Our chef uses a blend of herbs from the jungle planet Vira. It's our special recipe, very popular." The Quiet Tyrant frowned. "Humph. We'll see if it meets my standards." Myra nodded again, then walked away. Back in the kitchen, the cooks prepared the meal with care. Myra watched from the side, feeling the pressure but staying focused. When the food arrived at the table, the Quiet Tyrant cut into the roast with a slow, deliberate motion. He tasted it, his face unreadable. Then he made a small sound of displeasure. "This is too salty," he said quietly. Myra's heart sank, but she stayed calm. "I'm sorry, sir. I will tell the kitchen to prepare a new one right away." The quiet tyrant did not smile. He simply nodded. Myra rushed to the kitchen and told the chef. "We need a new solar roast, less salty," she said quickly. The chef nodded and started again. While the kitchen worked, Myra returned to the quiet tyrant's table. "Sir, I want to make sure you are satisfied," she said. "Is there anything else you need?" The quiet tyrant looked at her for a long moment. Then he said something unexpected. "You're different from the others. You don't look afraid." Myra smiled politely. "I believe everyone deserves respect, sir." The quiet tyrant's eyes softened just a little. "Maybe," he said. When the second plate came, the quiet tyrant tasted it carefully. This time, he nodded once. "Better." Myra felt a small wave of relief. After he finished eating, the quiet tyrant stood up and left without a word. The restaurant staff whispered excitedly. "Did you see that? Myra didn't break under pressure. Maybe she's not like the others." Myra felt proud but tired. She had faced the hardest customer on the station on her very first day. That night, as Myra looked out from the station's windows into the vast blackness of space, she thought about the quiet tyrant. She didn't know his true identity, but she felt something deeper behind his cold eyes, maybe a man tired of being alone, or a man who had forgotten how to trust. For the first time, Myra hoped she could make a difference here. Not just for herself, but for everyone who worked at the Starstone Lounge. And maybe, just maybe, she could teach even the quiet tyrant that kindness was stronger than fear. The next morning, the Starstone Lounge buzzed quietly with activity. Myra arrived early, determined to prove she belonged in this place. The space station outside the windows glittered like a million stars, but inside the restaurant, the real stars were the people, the waiters, cooks, and cleaners who worked hard to keep this place running smoothly. Myra felt proud to be part of the team, even if it was still just her second day. She was still thinking about the quiet tyrant. Who was he really? Why did he come here, day after day, treating everyone with cold silence and sharp words? No one had ever dared to stand up to him until Myra. That morning, Joro approached her with a small smile. "Table 9 again today," he said. "Looks like you're his new server." Myra nodded and took a deep breath. "Thank you, Joro. I won't let him down." Joro laughed softly. "You're braver than most." The lunch crowd grew larger, the hum of voices rising and falling like the waves of a calm sea. Then the quiet tyrant arrived. He moved through the room without looking up, his eyes scanning the tables like a hawk hunting prey. He slipped into his usual booth, and the room seemed to hold its breath. Myra approached, trying to keep her hands steady. "Good afternoon, sir," she said, smiling gently. "Are you ready to order?" The quiet tyrant glanced up slowly. "The solar roast. Rare. With the starfruit salad. And a glass of dark nebula wine. Make sure the wine is chilled to exactly 6.7 degrees. Myra wrote everything down carefully. "Of course, sir. Anything else?" He leaned forward, his eyes sharp and cold. "Yes. The roast must have no pepper. Last time, it had too much. I don't want the same mistake." Myra nodded. "I understand, sir. I will tell the kitchen." As Myra left, the quiet tyrant called out one more time. "Make sure the staff don't waste my time. I have important matters to attend to." Myra smiled politely, but inside, her heart beat faster. No one had ever spoken like this to her before. In the kitchen, the chefs worked quickly to prepare the precise meal. Myra checked on the progress, quietly watching to make sure every detail was right. When the food arrived, Myra carefully placed the plate on the table. The quiet tyrant cut into the roast with slow, exact movements. He tasted it, then frowned. "Too dry," he said, quietly but clearly. Myra bowed her head slightly. "I am sorry, sir. I will have the kitchen prepare a new one with extra sauce." The quiet tyrant's lips pressed into a thin line. This time, Myra was ready. She spoke up gently but clearly. "Sir, may I ask something? We try our best, but if you could tell me what you like exactly, I can make sure it is perfect for you." He looked at her, surprised. No one has ever asked before. Myra smiled softly. "I believe good service is about listening." The quiet tyrant's eyes narrowed for a moment. Then, slowly, he said, "Fine. Less dry. More sauce. No pepper." "Thank you, sir," Myra said. She returned to the kitchen with this clear instruction. The chefs worked carefully to get it right. When the new dish arrived, the quiet tyrant took another bite. This time, he nodded once. "Better." Myra felt relief wash over her, but the quiet tyrant was not done. He continued to watch her, his cold eyes studying her every move. After the meal, he spoke again, this time softer. "You are not like the others. You stand up for yourself." Myra looked him in the eyes. "I believe everyone deserves respect, no matter who they are." The quiet tyrant paused, then said quietly, "Maybe you are right." The restaurant's other workers watched from a distance, amazed. For the first time, someone had spoken to the quiet tyrant without fear. But things changed quickly. The next day, the quiet tyrant returned, but his mood had darkened. He complained loudly about the lighting, the music, and even the color of the napkins. He demanded things that seemed impossible, like changing the menu on short notice. Some workers were frightened. Others were angry. Myra stayed calm, trying to find a way to meet his demands. "Sir," she said quietly during one tense moment, "I will do my best. But some things take time." The quiet tyrant's eyes flashed. "Do not waste my time," he snapped. The room went silent. Even the music seemed to stop. Myra's hands shook, but she held her ground. "I only want to help, sir," she said softly. Then something unexpected happened. The quiet tyrant looked at her, not with anger, but with a strange respect. "Very well," he said. "You may stay." That night, Myra sat alone in her small room, thinking about the day. Why was he so hard to please? Was it because he was testing her? Or was there something deeper behind his harsh words? She remembered what Joro had told her, the quiet tyrant isn't just rude. He's hiding something. Maybe pain, maybe fear. Myra thought about the workers who were afraid to speak up. She thought about the long hours and the small pay. She thought about her family back on the mining colony, waiting for her to send money home. She felt a new fire inside her, a desire to change things, not just for herself but for everyone on the station. If she could stand up to the quiet tyrant, maybe others could stand up too. Maybe kindness and courage could break through the cold walls of fear. And maybe, just maybe, the quiet tyrant could become something more. Days passed, and the Starstone Lounge hummed with its usual rhythm, the steady flow of customers, the soft clinking of dishes, and the quiet conversations that filled the space station's finest restaurant. Yet something had changed beneath the surface. The presence of Myra and her quiet courage was starting to ripple through the staff like a gentle but growing wave. The quiet tyrant had returned again and again, each time more curious, more watchful. He began to test Myra in new ways, as if trying to see just how much she could handle. One afternoon, Myra was carrying a tray of drinks when the quiet tyrant stopped her. "You forgot the lemon twist in my Nebula wine," he said sharply. Myra blinked, surprised. "I'm sorry, sir. I will bring it immediately." She turned to the kitchen but paused. The twist was missing. The kitchen was busy, and they had run out of fresh lemons from the Vira planet. Myra returned to the table and said honestly, "I'm sorry, sir. We don't have any fresh lemon twists at the moment. Would you like me to bring you another drink instead?" The quiet tyrant's eyes narrowed. "Is this a joke?" "No, sir. I want to give you the best service possible." He stared at her for a long moment. Then, quietly, he said, "Very well. Bring me a glass of plain Nebula wine." Myra nodded and left. Word spread quickly among the staff about the small battle at table 9. The quiet tyrant had never accepted a no before, and Myra's honesty had surprised him. That night, Myra sat in the break room with Garo, the cook who had worked on the station for years. He was a tall, quiet man with a slow smile. "Most people just say yes to him," Garo said, shaking his head. "He pushes and pushes until they break." Myra nodded. "But I want to show him something different." Garo laughed softly. "You're brave, Myra. But be careful. This man is not just rude, he's powerful. And powerful people don't like to be challenged." Myra thought about this as she looked out the window at the dark stars. The next day, the quiet tyrant's visits became more frequent. But instead of simple complaints, he began to set strange challenges. One afternoon, he asked Myra to prepare a special meal from a rare alien recipe that no one on the station had ever cooked before. The ingredients were hard to find, and the kitchen staff had never tried it. Myra took the challenge seriously. She studied the recipe carefully, spoke to the alien diplomats who sometimes dined at the lounge, and learned how to prepare the dish. She even convinced the kitchen to order the rare spices and vegetables from the next planetary system. When the meal was ready, she brought it to the quiet tyrant's table. He took a bite and looked surprised. Then he nodded slowly. "Impressive," he said softly. Myra smiled but did not let herself feel proud. She knew this was just another test. Afterwards, the quiet tyrant began to watch Myra more closely. His cold eyes followed her across the dining room. He noticed the way other staff smiled at her. He saw how they whispered about her courage. One evening, after the lounge had quieted down, Myra found herself alone near the bar. The quiet tyrant approached, walking slowly. "You handle yourself well," he said quietly. Myra looked up, steady and calm. "Thank you, sir. Why do you not fear me?" Myra thought for a moment. "Because fear makes people weak. I believe respect is stronger." He studied her for a long time, then said, "Most people do not understand that." "Maybe because they have never met someone who stands up to them," Myra said. The quiet tyrant smiled, but it was a sad smile. "Perhaps," he said. As the days went on, Myra noticed small changes in the way the quiet tyrant behaved. He no longer shouted at the kitchen. He no longer demanded impossible things. Instead, he began to listen. At one point, he even asked her advice on how to improve the menu. Myra was surprised but careful. She knew the quiet tyrant was still testing her. She gave honest answers but never crossed the line. Slowly, the staff began to feel something new: hope. For the first time, the workers in the Starstone Lounge felt like they could breathe a little easier. They saw Myra standing tall, speaking up, and even the quiet tyrant seemed to respect that. One day, Myra overheard a conversation between two engineers fixing the station's power system. "She's the only one who isn't scared of him," one engineer said. "Yeah," the other replied. "Maybe she's the start of something different." Myra smiled quietly to herself. She knew the road ahead would be hard. The quiet tyrant still held power, and his tests could get tougher. But for now, She had made a small crack in the wall of fear. And that was enough. The Starstone Lounge continued to buzz with its usual mix of voices and footsteps. Myra moved through the restaurant with growing confidence, her quiet strength inspiring the other workers to believe that things might finally change. Yet beneath the surface, something was stirring, a secret waiting to be uncovered. One afternoon, as Myra was clearing a table near the back, a small explosion echoed through the hallways of the station. The sound was faint but sharp enough to stop her in her tracks. People around her paused and glanced toward the service doors. Moments later, a food delivery drone crashed just outside the kitchen doors. It was strange, these drones rarely malfunctioned. The drone's cargo hatch was open, and inside were several small containers wrapped in heavy-duty materials. Joro, the head waiter, immediately called security. Myra stood back, watching as two officers arrived quickly and began inspecting the containers. They wore serious faces, speaking in hushed tones that made the workers around them curious and nervous. Myra, unable to resist, edged closer. Garo appeared beside her. "What's going on?" Myra whispered. Garo shook his head. "No one knows yet. But these containers shouldn't be here. Something's wrong." The security officers soon sealed off the area and started scanning the containers. Myra caught a glimpse of a strange symbol stamped on one box, one she recognized from her colony's reports. It was the emblem of Solaris Systems, the huge corporation that owned Orbital 1 and controlled most of the new colonies. Her mind raced. Why would Solaris secure shipments be in a crashed drone here? And why was the quiet tyrant the only person who seemed connected to Solara at all? Later that day, Myra shared what she saw with Garo. Together, they decided to dig a little deeper. Myra was careful, she didn't want to get into trouble, but curiosity and a growing sense of responsibility pushed her forward. Using the station's public terminal, Myra began to search for information about Solara shipments. She learned that many of the company's operations were secret, protected by high-level security clearances. Only a handful of people on the station had the power to access those files. One name kept appearing: the man who sat at table 9. The quiet tyrant. Myra's heart beat faster. The rude man who pushed and tested her every day was not just a difficult customer. He was the CEO of Solaris Systems, undercover and watching everything. This explained a lot: his cold manner, his sharp eyes, and the way he seemed to control everything without anyone knowing. Myra shared the discovery with Garo. If he's the CEO, why does he act like that? Why be so harsh? Garo looked serious. Maybe he's testing everyone. Or maybe he has reasons no one else understands. For Myra, the truth raised new questions. Was he a tyrant because he wanted to be? Or was he a man carrying the weight of too much responsibility? That evening, Myra prepared for her shift, her thoughts heavy with what she had learned. She knew the quiet tyrant's visits were no longer just about food. They were about power, control, and maybe even trust. As the lounge filled with guests, the quiet tyrant arrived again, his usual sharp glare scanning the room. Myra approached his table with steady hands. "Good evening, sir. May I take your order?" The quiet tyrant's eyes locked onto hers, sharper than ever. "I want the solar roast, medium this time. And bring me the starfruit salad." Myra nodded. "Right away." As she turned to leave, he spoke quietly, "Did you find what you were looking for?" Myra froze for a moment. Could he know? Did he suspect that she was digging into his world? "I'm here to serve, sir," she said carefully. The quiet tyrant leaned back, a small, almost hidden smile appearing on his lips. "Very well. We will see if you are as clever as you think." Myra walked away, heart pounding. Behind her calm words was a new challenge, a test of loyalty, trust, and courage. Over the next few days, Myra watched the quiet tyrant closely. He seemed less harsh, almost thoughtful. He still pushed her and the staff, but there was something softer behind his cold eyes. One evening, while cleaning tables late, Myra overheard a conversation between two low-level engineers. "He's hiding more than anyone knows," one said. "The CEO keeps secrets that could change everything here." The other nodded. If only someone brave enough would stand up. Myra's mind raced. Was that someone her? She realized her small acts of courage were beginning to matter. The workers looked at her with hope. The quiet tyrant was watching, testing. And the station itself was holding its breath. For the first time, Myra understood that her job was more than serving food. It was about standing for something bigger: fairness, respect, and the courage to face the unknown. As she looked out over the glittering stars beyond the station windows, Myra made a silent promise. No matter what secrets or dangers lay ahead, she would stand tall. She would face the quiet tyrant and the power he represented. Because sometimes, even the coldest walls could be broken with one brave voice. And maybe, just maybe, that voice could change everything. The Starstone Lounge had changed. The air felt lighter, the staff moved with more confidence, and even the regular customers noticed a new energy. Myra's quiet courage was spreading like a soft light through the once tense restaurant. But the quiet tyrant, no, the CEO was still watching. His cold eyes studied her every move. And now, it was clear that he had a plan. One busy afternoon, as the lunch rush swelled, the quiet tyrant called Myra to his table. "Come here," he said quietly but firmly. Myra's heart quickened. She walked over and stood beside him, careful to keep her voice steady. "Yes, sir. I have a challenge for you." Myra blinked, surprised. "A challenge?" He nodded slowly. "This place," he said, "has many rules. Many secrets. You have seen some, but not all. If you want to truly understand the station and the people who work here, you must prove your strength not just in service, but in heart." Myra listened closely. "I will give you 1 week. During that time, I want you to solve a problem that has troubled this restaurant for years." "What problem?" Myra asked, curious. "The energy supply. Orbital 1's power system is unstable. Sometimes the lights flicker, or the heat fades. It affects everything: cooks, waiters, customers. No one knows how to fix it." Myra thought about the engineers she had overheard talking. The power system was old and fragile. "You want me to fix it?" she asked. The quiet tyrant nodded. "Yes. If you can solve the problem, you will earn the respect of everyone here. You will show that you are more than a waitress." Myra was quiet for a moment. The challenge was greater than any she had faced. "But I'm not an engineer," she said honestly. "Use what you have," he said. "Sometimes, the greatest strength comes from asking the right questions." Myra nodded slowly, understanding the true meaning behind his words. That night, she began her work. She spoke to the engineers, learning about the station's energy grid. She listened to their frustrations and fears. She watched how they worked and where the problems appeared. She noticed that the power system was managed by old technology and that the engineers lacked some important tools. Myra gathered her courage and spoke to the station manager, explaining what she had learned. The manager listened carefully and agreed to give the engineers more resources to repair the system. Over the next few days, Myra continued to support the engineers, bringing them food, encouraging them, and passing messages between the workers and the management. The staff noticed her efforts. The quiet tyrant watched from his table, a small smile playing on his lips. One evening, as the lights flickered again, Myra stood with the engineers in the control room. "We can fix this," she said confidently. "We just need to work together." The engineers nodded, inspired by her determination. Slowly, the power system began to stabilize. On the seventh day, the quiet tyrant returned to the Starstone Lounge. Myra approached him with a calm smile. "Sir, the power system is stronger now. The engineers have new tools, and the repairs are working." He looked at her with deep respect. "You have done well," he said quietly. Myra felt a warmth inside her chest. She had faced his challenge and succeeded. The quiet tyrant stood and extended his hand. "Welcome to the team, Myra." The restaurant erupted in whispers. No one had ever heard the quiet tyrant speak so kindly. Myra shook his hand, feeling the weight of his power and the promise of change. That night, as the station's lights shone steady and bright, Myra looked out into the vast darkness of space. She thought about the journey ahead. The quiet tyrant was no longer just a customer. He was a man with secrets, struggles, and perhaps a chance for redemption. And Myra was ready to face whatever came next. The Starstone Lounge was quiet for once. The usual chatter and clatter of plates had given way to a peaceful calm. Myra sat at a small table near the window, watching the stars twinkle beyond the glass walls of the space station. The quiet tyrant, now known to her as Mr. Solon, was in the restaurant too, but he no longer carried the sharp glare that had once frozen the room. Instead, there was a softness in his eyes, a weight lifted, though still present. Myra remembered how he had challenged her to fix the power system, how he had tested her patience and courage. Now, after days of hard work, things were better. The lights stayed bright, the kitchen was warmer, and the atmosphere was lighter. But there was more to Mr. Solon than she understood. She knew he was a man carrying heavy burdens, and she wanted to know his story. After the rush had died down, Myra found herself near the quiet tyrant's table. He was alone, staring out the window. "May I join you?" she asked softly. He looked at her, surprised but nodded. They sat together in silence for a moment, watching the stars. "Why do you come here every day?" Myra asked gently. Mr. Solon sighed. "This place, it reminds me of something I lost." Myra waited, sensing the weight in his words. "I wasn't always like this," he continued. "I was once full of hope and dreams. But running a company like Solaris Systems changes a person. Decisions must be made that hurt others. I lost friends, trust, and part of myself." Myra listened carefully, her heart softening. "Is that why you were so cold?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes. I built walls to protect myself. But in doing so, I pushed everyone away." Myra smiled gently. "It takes courage to admit that." He looked at her with surprise. "You have shown me another way," he said quietly. "You stood up to me when no one else would. You listened when others only obeyed. You reminded me what it means to be human." Myra felt a warmth she had never expected. "Maybe," she said, "we both have things to learn." For the first time, Mr. Solon smiled fully. "Perhaps you are right." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the station manager, who came with an important message. "Mr. Solon, the board wants to meet with you," the manager said. "They've heard about the changes here and want to discuss the future." Mr. Solon stood slowly. "It seems my work is not finished." Myra nodded. "Whatever happens, remember this: kindness and courage can change even the hardest hearts." He looked at her, gratitude shining in his eyes. "I will remember." The next days were full of meetings and plans. Mr. Solon spoke of new ideas to improve life on the station, not just for workers but for all residents. Myra watched as the cold CEO transformed into a leader who cared. The Starstone Lounge became a symbol of hope and change. Workers smiled more, customers stayed longer, and the station felt alive with possibility. One evening, Mr. Solon approached Myra with a small box. "For you," he said simply. Inside was a simple pin, a symbol of the station and the lounge. "Wear it," he said. You belong here. Myra accepted it with a smile, feeling proud. As the stars shone bright outside, Myra knew this was only the beginning. Together, they would face whatever challenges came next. Because even the coldest hearts could be warmed by a single act of courage. The days following the board meeting were filled with hopeful energy. Myra noticed it everywhere, in the smiles of her co-workers, in the brighter decorations around the lounge, and even in the way Mr. Solon carried himself. The cold, distant man was becoming someone who cared not just about power, but about people. One morning, as the Starstone Lounge prepared for the day's rush, Myra received a message from Mr. Solon. It was simple but important: meet me in the observation deck at noon. Curious and a little nervous, Myra finished her tasks quickly. When she arrived, Mr. Solon was already there, staring out at the endless stars. "Thank you for coming," he said without turning. Myra smiled. "What is this about, sir?" He finally looked at her, his eyes softer than she had ever seen. "This station is more than a place for business or survival. It's a home for thousands. I want to make it better, not just for Solaris Systems, but for everyone who lives and works here." Myra nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "That's why I want your help." She blinked. "My help?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small data chip. "This contains plans for new projects: better housing, cleaner energy, improved working conditions. But I need someone who knows the people here, someone who understands their needs." Myra looked at the chip, then back at him. "I don't know if I'm the right person." Mr. Solon smiled. "You're the perfect person. You've already shown courage and kindness. You know this place better than anyone." Myra felt a mix of pride and fear. "I'll do my best," she said. Together, they began working on the plans. Myra met with workers, listening to their stories and ideas. She shared these with Mr. Solon, who listened carefully and took action. The Starstone Lounge became a center of change. New equipment arrived, old machines were fixed, and the workers' voices were heard like never before. One evening, the staff gathered to celebrate their progress. Music played softly, and laughter filled the air. Myra looked around at the happy faces: the cooks, waiters, engineers, and even some customers. Mr. Solon approached her, offering a drink. "To new beginnings," he said. Myra raised her glass. "To courage and kindness." They clinked glasses, and in that moment, a true partnership was born. But change was not always easy. Some members of the board resisted the new ideas, fearing loss of control. Rumors spread about Mr. Solon's leadership. One day, Myra overheard a tense conversation between two executives. "He's too soft," one said. "We must take back control." Myra felt a chill. The old power struggles were not gone. She knew she had to stand strong. At the next board meeting, Mr. Solon faced tough questions. Myra was there to support him, speaking up for the workers and the future of the station. Her words surprised many. Calm but firm, she explained how kindness and respect had improved morale and productivity. The board members listened. Slowly, the tides began to turn. The Starstone Lounge and the station as a whole started to thrive like never before. Myra's courage had sparked a movement. The quiet tyrant was no more. In his place stood a leader who had learned the true meaning of power. One night, after the lounge had closed, Myra walked through the empty dining area. She paused near table 9, now simply called the CEO's table. She smiled, remembering how far they had come. Her phone beeped a message from Mr. Solon. "Thank you for believing in change." Myra typed back, "Together, we'll build a better future." Looking out the window, she saw the stars shining bright and felt hope like never before. The Starstone Lounge was no longer just a place to eat or work. It was a symbol. a symbol of courage, kindness, and the power of one person to make a difference. And Myra knew that this was only the beginning.